Welcome to the FML Podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Sachdev, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML Podcast. Today we're joined by Philip Belamant, co-founder and CEO of Zilch. Philip, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to see you, Shamir. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. Well, look, let's just jump straight into it. So, kind of for everyone out there, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey so far with Pay Zilch?
Absolutely. So, right now the company, we're in an interesting space here in the business. We really are in the sweet spot of payment. And ultimately, we started in the BNPL space. This was a really interesting proposition that we offered to customers. But we've grown into something so much bigger than that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But effectively, the business, we grow by 250,000 customers every single month. We're the fastest zero to double unicorn out of Europe ever, which is really exciting. But most importantly, we went from 0 to over 2.5 million customers, more than 6% of the adult population here in the UK, in record speed. That was just 18 months, which is quicker than a lot of the brands that we love and admire, companies like Revolut and Wise and, people like this, which we really think are awesome brands. We did it at least 2 times faster than all of these guys, which is exciting. And we've recently launched in Miami. So, we're just 3 months now into the US market, which is really exciting. We're seeing about 4 times the speed of growth there. So in a nutshell, really, Zilch we're trying to create the most empowering way to pay for people. That's effectively what we are building. That's the aspiration for us as a business. And so far, we feel we're doing a pretty good job. We're seeing a huge amount of feedback from customers. They love what we're doing, and we're adding a lot of value to people in their daily lives.
Cool. So let's kind of start at the beginning in terms of your journey with Zilch. I mean, what led you to build Zilch to begin with?
I've always been in payments. So, I've been an entrepreneur in fintech for all of my career. I left university and I started a business in South Africa where we were trying to solve a problem. And that was that I noticed that shopping centers on the weekends, you had these long lines of people, big queues, kilometers long. And I thought maybe, there's sales going on or there's some special happening here. And what I realized when I joined the line and I asked what people are doing is people were queuing up to pay for airtime or electricity or, bill payments. And they had traveled for hours just to get there to do this, wasting their weekends away from friends and family. And so, I started a business that basically we, solved this problem for people. And the whole objective was, how do we fundamentally transform the experience for this customer, but at the same time leave the ecosystem intact that is already there? And so what we did is we ended up lending airtime and electricity to people at their homes on the weekend via their mobile device. And then when they were on their way to work on the Monday, they could then just repay us at that vendor or that shopping center, which would have been close to them when they were going to work on the Monday. So the convenience was so much greater. And we found that we reunited people with their family and loved ones on the weekends. We actually had one of these big cathode ray tube screens, these big old school monitors where we triangulated people using their phones on the weekend. We had red dots for people who were dependent on green dots, and the green dots were always apart from the red ones because they were off buying these products and services away from the dependents, the family and the friends. And actually we came in after 2 weeks post launching the service. We already had 2 million customers in that time. And we actually thought the screen was broken because all these dots were magenta color, and all huddled in one area. And what we realized is, in fact, it wasn't broken. It was the red and green was overlapping. We had reunited people with their friends and family for the first time in their lives on weekends. So that's when I really realized that you can make a fundamental difference to people's lives through the use of innovative technology. That was really, for me, the penny drop moment. Oh, wow. You read about this, you see this, and a lot of people talk about how do you transform people's lives with tech, but you don't really often understand, physically, practically, what does that mean? And this was such a practical example for me of, a service that was genuinely changing people's lives for the better. And so that's when the bug bit, so to speak. And I thought, wow, this is really what I want to do with my life, is what other services can we dream up and build that transform people's lives? And so in this case with Zilch, the mission is simple. We have $1 trillion problem. Across the UK and the US, there's more than $1 trillion, if you can believe it, sitting on credit cards, revolving at 20% interest and higher. And that means that people are paying over $140 billion a year in fees and interest to credit card companies. If you can believe it, right? That's a lot of money. And so really the aspiration of Zilch is to bring that 140 billion to zero. How do we offer people access to financial services that allow them to pay in one and get deals and discounts, or pay over time like a credit card, but for free, no interest and no fees of any kind? And how do we do that? And that's really what our mission is. That's what we are trying to achieve. And the good news is we've already saved customers more than £65 million alone. And that's just in the last 12 months. So we've got a long way to go. It's going to take a lot of businesses like us. It's going to take a lot of Apples and Zilchs and a lot of billion-dollar companies to fix this problem. But we're on our way.
Cool. It's, some of the numbers there are just crazy to think about. And the, I suppose the opportunity as well from a marketing perspective as well. One of our previous episodes, we were speaking to the team at FML, and they had a real sort of bee in their bonnet around the traditional sort of buy now, pay later providers. And I won't mention any particular brands, specifically, they might be pink in terms of their brand colours. And kind of what I want to surface here is how is Zilch different from a lot of the incumbents, the traditional buy now, pay later offerings that are out there at the moment? And then, also how have you managed to then leapfrog those players as well?
The reality is that there's a lot of people have a lot to say about companies, right? I call these people sort of couch referees. At the end of the day, have they built $1 billion business? So have they built a company like Klarna? No, probably not. So, a lot of people have got an opinion. Let's just put that opinion in perspective to begin, I would say. So for me, companies like Klarna and others, Afterpay, Affirm, we take a lot of inspiration from these businesses. We think they've built some phenomenal companies. But remember that they started building these businesses 17 years ago. So if Zilch went and did something that was the same today, you would probably be shocked. I mean, you should give us a medal for being the least innovative company in the world, right? And so it would be expected that we leverage today's technology to leapfrog what they've done or how they're doing it. If we didn't do that, what would be the point? And so I don't think it comes to a shock to any of these previous businesses that we're doing something very different to what they're doing. Otherwise, what would have been the point of the last 17 years of technical innovation if we didn't leverage it? So I want to start with saying some of these businesses are really interesting and cool companies, but there's a fundamental difference between these businesses and what we do as Zilch. So, BNPL, these point of sale finance checkout buttons, fundamentally, it's simple. Their customers are the retailers. They sell to retailers who on-sell them to consumers. And so the problem with this model is that 10 or 15 years ago, it was really smart. It was really very clever, right? Because you signed up a retailer and they distributed you to all of their customers for a very low cost. And because there wasn't much competition, you could demand a premium. You could maybe charge 5 or 6% per transaction. And, retailers would do this. Fast forward to today, and unfortunately, there's a lot of competition. And so the problem is you have a number of these guys all fighting with each other to provide their service to a finite number of retailers, because let's be honest, a lot of the trade goes to the top 250, 350 retailers, and then you've got the long tail. And so it's basic economics, right? You have an oversupply of cash at the checkout, all these buttons, and a finite demand, which is retailers and their customers. And so the price must come down. It's a commodity. And that's what's happened. So they've all undercut one another to ultimately go and try and grab this land. And the problem with that is they've eroded the profitability of the model. At the same time, bad debt losses are increasing, and they have SLAs through which they must lend to a certain percentage of people, and that creates a problem for them to manage. Now, I'm not saying that some of them won't figure it out. I'm sure they got smart people, and they will, but that's what we don't like about this model. In Zilch's case, we took a different approach, and our view was, let's go direct to the customer. Let's go offer the customer this value, and they can go anywhere they want with this, right? And this way, what you find is you have all the retailers in the world actually competing against one another to access the Zilch customer base that by nature is finite. And so you have a reverse economic problem, right? Where actually you've got the retailers fighting to access our customers and our customers' buying power. And there's a finite number of them and almost an infinite number of retailers because there's millions of retailers in the world. And so they're all trying to access our customer base and their buying power by bidding commission per sale. And that's why the price goes up. And that's the model you've seen in Meta, in Google, in TikTok. It's reverse bidding and it works. The market pushes the price up. No one phones Google and says, I really don't like the cost per clicks today. Google doesn't care. They're benign to the fee, right? It's what you bid is what you get. And it's the same on the Zilch platform. So in the last 6 months, for instance, brands on average bid about 50% more than they were 6 months ago to access the Zilch customer base. So, we have upward pressure on the model because we're driving 3 times conversion to retailers. And when the customers convert, they spend 45%, 75% more on average. So it's a very valuable channel for brands to go and spend their marketing budget in. And we think that's the answer here. So effectively what we've built at Zilch is a business that has as strong unit economics as the likes of Capital One or Amex, but ultimately we have the retailers' marketing budgets finance the cost of credit rather than the 140 billion paid by customers. And that's the arbitrage that we found in the market, and this has never been done before.
That's, to be honest with you, I mean, obviously I understood the model, and explaining it like that is completely, if I'm honest, opened up my eyes a little bit, and I kind of see the space there. I suppose one of my questions around that is that do you think there'll be a point at which, you've seen huge amounts of growth at a rapid pace? I imagine you're very aware that that's going to slow down at some point. But do you think there'll be a point at which that becomes saturated, or do you think that'll be compensated by the fact that you'll be rolling out the product globally at some point?
What's important to us is utilization. So when you look at a business like ours, so again, take point of sale finance buttons. Even the best guys in the market, and they've got great businesses, like a Klarna, your average customer is using them 12 or 15 times per year. Companies like Affirm, customers are using on average twice a year, right? You only buy a Peloton once every now and again. And so the utilization's low because it's a niche lending point of sale finance product. Zilch's utilization's off the charts. Our average customer uses us 86 times per annum on average. Our most mature returning customers now today use us every single day of their lives. More than they use Amazon. In some cases, more than they use Amex, right? And that's the fundamental difference here. So customers are not just using us for discretionary purchases. In fact, customers are using us for day-to-day shopping and non-discretionary purchases. So that's everything from grocery through to power, through to their Pret for lunch, whether that's the tube to tap and pay or the bus to work or the Uber or they're using us as their principal way of paying. Because every time they do this, whether they pay on debit, they get 2 to 5% cash back. If they pay on credit, it's for free, no interest of any kind. That's the value that customers see in our product. That's the flywheel we've created. So to answer your question, even if consumer spend generally starts to dip or come down, because we're not just a discretionary purchase, which is what gets hit first, we are non-discretionary purchasing tool as well. So what we actually see is we take more and more of the total spend per month from a customer's daily spend on an ongoing basis. And so we're seeing customer spend with Zilch, in fact, growing during this period, which is really interesting. And then, of course, coming off a base of 2.5 million in the UK, we've got 150,000 customers in the US after just 2 months of operation there, and that's growing exponentially. So because we have so much growth ahead of us, we can buck the consumer downward trend in spending anyway, just by nature of the fact that we're growing so fast on customer acquisition.
You've hit a couple of points there, which kind of leaks into my next question, which was around, frankly, just Klarna's down round, basically. We're all aware of the headlines at the moment. They were, I think, the highest valued private fintech in Europe. And obviously they've taken funding at the moment that's seen them, I think, valued at sort of 1/7 of what they were before. But I suppose all the things that you've spoken about, those metrics, those economics, do you think that's enough to keep Zilch's valuation buoyant in the current market? Or do you think, much like you've said, you've bucked the trend. Do you think you'll buck the trend in terms of valuations as well?
Well, obviously, as you know, we've just closed and announced an extension to our Series C round at the same valuation as we closed in, late last year, October, November last year, which was at 2 billion. So we've just announced an additional 50 million. So that takes the round to 160 million. And we closed this now. So we just announced this, last week, and that was at the same valuation. And really what's happened there is, again, investors have looked at our business. They've come to us and said, obviously, we're watching what's going on in the market. You have things going on with Klarna, or let's say a firm, and their share price is down, and et cetera. What's going on with Zilch? Where we at? And when these investors sit with us and we talk through the numbers, hey, look at the utilization. We almost, we're between 7 and 10 times more utilized than any product in the market that the market's ever seen. But most importantly, our returning customer cohorts, mature customer cohorts, are net transaction margin positive, right? Now, this is critical. So all of a sudden, investors are like, hang on. Customers are using you habitually, daily. And when they use you, you make money, right? Because the problem with most fintech over the last decade is that they've got some beautiful, shiny card, except the problem is every time you swipe that card, the fintech loses money. We actually call that model VC to C. Okay. You're taking venture capital money, giving it to customers. We don't believe in that. That's not a sustainable model. So we understand that there's obviously a growth element and phase, and you figure the unit economics out. That's great. The good news is in our returning customers, we're already net transaction margin positive. So in other words, the more they use us, the more they come back, the more they spend, the more money we can as a business make and see starting to drop to the bottom line. And that's why investors are so excited about what we're doing. And I suspect, I cannot speculate for these other companies, if there's a down round and as you say, Klarna is seeing a 7th, the point is that, remember, investors still believe that business could be worth 3 or 4, 5x that, because they're investing at that price to make a return of 3 or 4, 5x. So they still think that business could be hugely valuable. Let's not forget that, right? I'm sure they whatever issues that these companies might have, I suspect it's got to do with unit economics. Are those economics upside down? And if they are, then I'm sure there'll be pressure to get them the right way around. But luckily and fortunately, with our unique model, we're already seeing that in our mature cohorts.
So talking about that, again, those sort of, potentially having those unit economics upside down, it's very, very clear to me. I mean, you've got a huge handle on the space itself. What learnings have you taken from the other buy now, pay later competitors that are around you that you've tried to, leverage and use to your advantage for Zilch?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the first one that we sort of looked at when we watched the space was regulation. Let's not operate in some exemption. This is a debt instrument. We have to protect customers. And by the way, largely, a number of these operators, really do go out of their way to protect customers. They just didn't go as far as to get regulated. And that was one lesson we certainly did learn when we were setting up, is we said, we need to go and be protecting our customers, and we need to give them that consumer protection they deserve and want. Let's go and get a license from the get-go. So we did learn that. The other thing we learned, frankly, is that this is a product that's in high demand. It doesn't seem to discriminate across affordability spectrum, even country or language. You have people using this product from Abu Dhabi to Ghana, very recent companies like South Africa, the UK, the US, Philippines, everywhere. It's very rare that you find a product that's consumed without it being completely different in each market. You think about Coca-Cola as one of these unique things. It doesn't matter where you go, you can ask for, Coca-Cola and they'll give it to you, and the formula's the same, and we all love it. And this is what we found was so interesting. So we learned that the formula works well. What we also learned is that the model is just, it's not that it's bad, it's just old, right? It was invented so long ago, and it's come under all the pressures I spoke about at the get-go of this discussion. That meant that we didn't like the model from the get-go. We just didn't like it, right? You almost have to emerge as a winner in the market to make the unit economics work. And we just don't believe that in a market this size, you can be the winner. It just doesn't feel that will happen. So what we did is we said, let's not take the same approach. The world's moved on. Technology is different. We can find a very unique, interesting way to monetize this and build a unit economic that's more profitable and has longevity. I mean, just to give you an idea, ad budgets, one question we've had from investors is, oh, well, what are ad budgets going to be? And would they be able to subsidize this cost to your customers in the future? But ad budgets are predicted to go to $1 trillion in the next 3 years, right? That would mean that Zilch could process almost $20 trillion a year in top line sales and be more profitable at a unit economic level than the likes of Amex. Right. So our view is, guys, yes, we have something with longevity. It's defensible, it's counter-cyclical, and it's making a margin. So these are some of the things that we learned from them, certainly. And we've got a bunch of people in our business that used to work for some of these companies, and they've brought a lot of learnings with them, whether that's, on collections or customer servicing. So, all of us owe some gratitude to these businesses that went out and blazed the path forward. We just chose a different one. And, obviously we think, and it seems Tim Cook and Apple believe that the way we've selected to go forward is the right way.
How much of a threat do you see Apple's solution versus Zilch's? Because obviously that's native to anyone who's going to have an iPhone. Do you think that will erode your market share or have a downward pressure on your market share? How do you feel about that? And what's your tact for handling that if you have one yet?
Yeah, I mean, we think we should pack up and go home. Is the I'm just kidding. So no, look, I mean, what we find interesting about the space is the reality of the situation is everyone talks about the solution. Oh, there's another solution that's come to market, right? But no one's talking about the problem. How big is the problem? And as I mentioned, you're talking $1 trillion is the problem. $140 billion of fees and interest every year that customers are paying that this solution is going to go and eat into. You're going to need so many Apples and Zilchs and many others to go and erode that 140 billion. It's going to take a concerted effort for us all to get it right. And frankly, I sleep better at night knowing that our mission to reduce this to zero has just accelerated, right? That's phenomenal to know that that's the case. It also needs to be said that, everyone thinks about these services and when Apple, and I love Apple, right? Fantastic. I'm talking to you on an Apple right now. The point is that they've launched their Apple Card for almost 4 years ago, and it was sort of the same buzz. Oh my gosh, credit card companies better pack it up. It's all over for them. Apple's been in the US now for almost 4 years with their card product. They just over 2% of adult card holders in the US today. It's insignificant, right? I don't think Chase Bank is losing sleep about that one. So the reality of the situation is that, look, Apple's, I'm sure they're going to do a great job. And I'm sure for people with an iPhone, which is only 45% of people in the UK anyway, should certainly check it out. That could be quite interesting. And of course, they're subject to all the rules that MasterCard imposes on them because they've just borrowed the technology from MasterCard. They've not built this themselves. So they would be restricted to whatever MasterCard allow. Zilch's system is proprietary. So there's a bunch of differences that are nuanced. But I would say overarching, the market is so large. If we cannot coexist with Apple in a market that's $1 trillion, we're just doing something wrong. And frankly, we probably don't deserve to be there anyway.
So you've been launching a number of new features such as, your tap and pay. You've got your pay in 4 at the moment. How did you create scalability within Zilch? What was your, how did you ensure that? Was that down to aligning product and marketing or did you sort of try and focus more on the virality element and the referral element of the product? What was your approach with that?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, I think it was a combination. It's a great question. I've never actually heard this before, but really it's a combination of 3 things, I would say. Product market fit, underlying tech, so is the tech stack scalable? And, ultimately then marketing, what are we doing with that? We never depended on virality or viral marketing because, I would say it's not many businesses that truly get that right. What we see Monzo, for instance, did, that was phenomenal. It's not often people get that right. Robinhood was a good example. Revolut's been a good example. Not many brands get that right. So we didn't want to depend on that. So what we did is we just said, look, what do we have at our disposal? We've got a world of experience in payments. So how do we build an MVP that we think is going to make sense and iterate that fast just to get that fit right? And touch wood, thankfully, we went out to market, and it's like always. You go out and you're like, but it's not ready yet. It's not perfect. It could be better. But get it in the market, and we did that fast. and we iterated really quickly. We had a hit list of 20, 30, 40 things every week. And at the end of the week, we're done with that list, and we got a new one and a new one and a new one and a new one every week for 6 months. And we really iterated into a position that was a sweet spot where we started to see utilization climbing, people using it, more understanding, CSAT scores going up. So, getting in the market fast and iterating was really a good start. Our CIO did a great job. His experience is all hyper elastic cloud. So Sean did a great job of putting this infrastructure in place from the get-go, which was fantastic. And, really, we wanted to make sure that that was elastic and scalable and at the same time compliant. And his background, comes from companies like DLG, insurance, which is just super heavy on compliance. So, of course, that helped. And then finally, marketing, in our team, as part of the founders team, we have a huge deal of experience in click arbitrage, online ads. And so, whatever we knew we were going to pay for clicks was going to be the lowest anyone was going to pay. And so we really backed ourselves to be able to go and build a pipe with tracking all the way from ad UTMs through to ultimately projected LTVs and keep feeding this back for lookalike audiences, retargeting, etc. And that's what we've effectively done. So people come through the funnel and they get to certain milestones that we can feed back against UTMs. And so we can slowly go and start to iterate campaigns. And today we run about 4,700 campaigns simultaneously at any given time. We create 150 new ads every single day. We test all of those ads. We pick the top 10 performers and we scale them. We throw out the rest and we create 150 new ones tomorrow. And we do that every day. So it's a combination of these things that really helped us get to the market, quick iteration for product fit, scalability so we don't let ourselves down as the volume comes, in infrastructure, but at the same time being able to go and pay as little as possible per click, coming from the days of arbitrage and understanding that click model and CPM model really well. So I hope that gives you the answer, but that's the combination really that we think led to the type of scale we've seen.
That's great. And then for those who've listened to my podcast on a regular basis, just re-emphasizing Philip's point there, tracking analytics all the way through the funnel. Yeah. I think it's massively overlooked.
You couldn't say it enough. Tracking. We still have, this conversation every month. Guys, more tracking. So absolutely, you could not have enough tracking.
Having just come off the back of a really successful fundraising round, what do you think your biggest learning has been from all of your fundraising rounds to date?
We could talk about this for a couple hours, and it would definitely be great to sit with my co-founder, Sean. We could really talk about this together. But, what we have learned certainly is that the first thing I would say, which is a great overarching message, is just be prepared to hear no lots of times. We raised our first round right in the middle of COVID. And that was 250 to 300 calls that we did to raise that initial 10 million round. And thankfully, actually, Zoom made this almost easier than in-person meetings because you could only do 4 in-person meetings a day. We were doing like 10, 12 meetings on Zoom every single day. So we could just knock this out in like 20 days. So I would say, hearing no, basically you should just take as feedback to refine the pitch because clearly, you can see where people object or you lose them. And so, that would be the first thing. The second is there's no one way to skin this cat. That I would say we've learned at Zilch, absolutely. So, a lot of people think I have to go to VCs. I then need to go to institutional or crossovers, et cetera, And what we've learned is that it's not necessarily true. There's a lot of options, and particularly in the UK, the government supports startups heavily, right? So you've got everything that's starting from SEIS to EIS. You then could move to, family office money, high net worth money, ultra high net worth money. And then, of course, you get VCs and institutions and crossovers. And what we've learned is that you can really blend these together. And if you can keep control of the cap table, and that's easy to say, obviously, because we are second, third time founders, we've sort of seen this movie before, and we were in a fortunate position to fund the business ourselves up front. So I get it. It's easy to say this, but trying to keep control of the cap table and make sure everyone's on common so that you don't have people's agendas getting out of line with one another. That's really critical. And that's something that's treated us so far to date really well. And, my co-founder, Sean, has been instrumental in helping and assisting to execute our corporate finance plan in this vein. And so really what we've done is, for us as a business, we've gone and we've pulled together a very diverse cap table. So we have everyone from the likes of Goldman Sachs in that cap table through to high net worths, ultra high net worth family offices. And what we found is, in fact, in some cases, those family offices or the principals are actually, in some cases, even more useful than institutions, because they themselves are the entrepreneurs. They've built a network for themselves. They've delivered for that network personally before. And so they can help us tap into this network and really get some advice or strategic input, or frankly, further funding if that's what's needed. So it's really an underrated way of going about building a cap table. And that's what we've managed to achieve to date. So that's been quite a learning, I have to say. It's been phenomenal to see it unfold. And of course, there's a long story ahead of us that we've really got to get right. So we don't take for granted where we are today. But what are we doing with this extension? Effectively, we're going and we are continuing to scale up in the US and continuing to build a best-in-class high-growth business in the UK. So you're talking 300% revenue year-on-year growth, and at the same time growing phenomenally fast, 4 times the speed we grew in the UK we're currently at in the US. So that's the short-term goals. This is what we focused on. We're going to do that well before we do anything else.
Outstanding. Philip, I know you've got to shoot off. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us on the FML Podcast today.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. We'll speak soon.
The FML Podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.